What's up, guys? Cali Sunset Gaming with you again, and finally we have reached a point where I'm releasing a sliders video. I know a lot of you guys have been asking for it, and it's taken me some time, I'll admit, and probably taken me a little bit longer than expected because I've been waiting for EA to release updates for FIFA that haven't really come. So I've ended up just having to base it off the current gameplay and hope that this helps you guys out as much as possible. Now, the same with the last couple of videos that I've done relating to slider settings is what I'm going to do is not only tell you the slider settings to use, but also talk about what each slider does. So if you can't necessarily get on with my sliders, I want to give you enough information to be able to, adjust the sliders yourself and be confident that the changes that you're making are going to make your gameplay better. So without further ado, let's get into it. FIFA 22 sliders, let's go. Just before we go any further, one thing I will say is that I am playing this on PlayStation 5. The footage that you're seeing is the standard PlayStation 5 camera setting. I think it's just the FIFA 22 camera setting for next-gen consoles. So unfortunately, you can't have this on PS4. I haven't tried these slider settings on a different console. These are only for PS5, but I mean, the game's not that different. I imagine it'd work. So let's move into the sliders. We're going to start off on the match settings. So when you go into game settings, this is the first page that you'll be greeted with. Half length, what I would do is either have it at 4 or 5 minutes. I only keep it at 4 minutes purely for my career mode series. The difficulty level, I've got it down as legendary for this, but one thing I will say is the same thing with the previous slider videos. If you try legendary for a period of time and it doesn't necessarily work out for you, it's still a bit too easy, then bump it up to ultimate, keep the same slider settings and just see how it is. Like I said, what I want to do is give you guys the tools to be able to tweak this at your own leisure so it's perfect for you. We've got competitor mode as off. Player-based difficulty, I also have this as off. Now, if this was star players, as in like a select few, we're talking Haaland, Ronaldo, Messi, Mbappe, Neymar, players like that, I'd probably say put this on. The difficulty is that it just relates to star players in the opposition team, whichever star player they have. So I've tried using this, hoping that it would be sort of semi-realistic, make it a little bit more difficult because they've got a special player that plays for them. But it's basically just the highest rated player of the opposition team will just be completely unplayable every game. And it's not a very realistic setting. So I keep that off. Next up, we have game speed. Now, I know a lot of other YouTubers select the game speed as slow. The adjustments that I've made, I've tried having it on slow, and I just think it's more realistic on normal. Don't get me wrong, I can understand why a lot of YouTubers will advise you to put it to slow, just to slow the game down, obviously, and try and make it a bit more slower pace to add that level of realisticness. But to me, the adjustments that I've made on the sliders sort of accommodate for that. So I've just left the game speed at normal. So let's get to the meat and gravy of this. We've got the user gameplay customization settings. Now, before we go any further, like I said, what I will do is I will make sure that I not only tell you what my slider settings are for each specific setting that we go through, I will also tell you how it's going to affect the gameplay and just give you my personal thoughts on it. So, like I said, if you don't necessarily get on with these slider settings, I want to give you guys enough information to be able to adjust the settings by yourself and try and find that perfect level of gameplay specifically for you. Sprint speed, we've got at 40, so we've lowered this down by 10 points. Acceleration, we've left that at 50. I do need to explain the difference between the sprint speed and the acceleration. So the sprint speed is the maximum speed a player can reach, whereas the acceleration is how long it takes that player to reach that speed. Got the shot error at 55 for the user gameplay customization. Shot error and pass error, these are things that are slightly different. I know that a few of you guys who watched my previous videos, you were thinking that if you lowered it, it made it more difficult to score, but that's actually the opposite with things like shot error and pass error. So shot error, you would raise it to increase the amount of error in the shots. This is why we've raised it to 55. The finesse shots aren't as great on this game. I think they've been tweaked and nerfed in a way that's actually better for FIFA as a whole. lob shots as well. Just your standard shots where you're pressing circle or B if you're on Xbox. Are more difficult to score. I've increased this to 55 just to make it a little bit more realistic. Less shots going in. It's quite easy to score from outside the box on this FIFA. A lot of keepers don't really have any shot stopping power. They're much better at like when it's close in, but from distance they don't really seem to get in the correct positions for shots. So I've set that at 55. The pass error I've raised to 55 as well. This is another thing. I've just tweaked this. I've been going up and down with it between like 50 and 70 for quite some time. I've ended up just settling on 55. The reason for this is sometimes when you're playing the game, I like the idea of being able to fizz off two-touch football to get around some of the teams at the lower end of the league, just because they're quite dense and difficult to break down. If you have the pass error too high, it's difficult to do that. You end up having to take a touch after controlling the ball, then face the player, then pass the ball to them. It sort of slows the overall gameplay down. I found that pass error at 55 is sort of like the perfect in between. Sometimes passes will go awry, but more often than not, they'll stay on target, but it's just something to keep you on your toes. Shot speed and pass speed are both down at 45. I've done this to just be included in slowing the overall game down. Shot speed and pass speed both down to 45. We've done this to sort of tie in with things like the sprint speed being low as well, just to accommodate for the overall game slowing down. This assists with this. Injury frequency, this is something that's down to you. I just do this because I like the certain je ne sais quoi of possibly having to face a lot of injuries during the course of a season. To me, I like things that are included like that just to make it more difficult. Not necessarily saying that you have to do it and this is the best way to have it. I just like being put on my toes by a player possibly picking an injury up during a game, or if I sim a couple of games, a couple of injuries coming in, so I have to rotate the squad. Just something more to think about, makes it more realistic. Injury severity I've increased up to 65, so rather than players going out with a bruised toe for 3 days, usually if a player goes down during the middle of the game, this sets the panic in, I'll be honest. So some of you guys might like me after this, some of you might hate me, but I like the idea of a player going down and just for a few seconds you have that panic of wondering if your star striker is going to be out for 7 months. Goalkeeper ability for the user, I've juggled with this one as well, guys. I'll be honest, like I've lowered it down to 45. I'm doing this to save your guys' controllers. Any lower, trust me, there's no controller that's safe. No TV that's safe. No plasterboard walls that are going to be safe from your knuckles if I get it any lower than 45. Even still, some of the goals that are going to go in are going to frustrate you. But to me, this is the perfect level just to make sure that the opposition have got that slight upper hand on you, but at the same time, the keeper's not completely useless. For the positioning of marking for the user, I've left this at 50. Again, like the previous video that I did on FIFA 21, this is more down to your specific managerial style in terms of the formation and the tactics that you use to set up. You can set the individual players to man mark or to area mark instead. So I've left this at 50 just so that it's still basically in your hands how the players are going to mark. Obviously, for this setting, if you want the players to mark the opposition tighter, you would raise it closer towards 100. If you want them to be more zonal, you would lower it down. But in my personal opinion, I'll be honest with you, it's easier just to use the tactics screen to set them up to man mark if you want them to man mark. And as a default, the players will zonal mark. So just keep that in mind. The run frequency for the user, I've lowered this down to 55. This just means how frequently your players are going to make runs. So if you raise it closer to 100, it means that your players are going to be making more runs. One thing I will say about this FIFA is that players do not hesitate to make runs anymore, which is really good, but at the same time can make it quite easy if you're playing against a team with a very high back line. If you go a goal up against Liverpool or Man City, it's basically all she wrote. You can just have your man hang on that last defender and you can break on them near enough every time, just using counter-attack after counter-attack to beat them. So what I've done is I've lowered this down so there's more emphasis on using passing to break teams down and manually using the sort of like give and go option to send a player on a run. Things like line height and line length, again, I prefer this to be down to your specific formation rather than being set out specifically by the sliders. So I've left these both at 50. The line height is basically just how high your defensive line is going to be in your own half closer to 100, closer to the halfway line, closer to 0, closer to your own goal. Line length is just how compact or spread out the team will stay at the back line. So again, personally, I would just keep this at 50. You really want to just use things like the line length, height and width. That needs to all be down to sort of how your formation plays. The higher the line length, the more they're going to spread out over the pitch. Line width, that's the same concept, but basically how wide the back four is going to be across the width of the pitch. Raise it to 100, they're going to be more spread out. Lower it to 0, they're going to be more compact. Fullback positioning, I've lowered this down to 45. You'll find that your wing backs or your left and right backs, they're just as a standard. Even if you say don't get forward, they're still going to make bombing runs forward. I've lowered this down to 45 because it is a very effective attacking tool. And what we want to do is obviously not limit how many options that we have, but make it more difficult for us. That's what everyone's here for, isn't it? We're just trying to make the game a little bit more difficult. So more emphasis on you involving the fullback players to actually get them moving on their runs rather than the AI just carrying that out for you. If you did want the fullback players to carry on making those runs, what you do is you'd raise it closer to 100. If you wanted them to make more runs, do it over 50, maybe to 60. If you wanted them to be making more runs down that wing, obviously the downside of this is that it is going to leave you exposed at the back, depending on what sort of formation you're playing. The power bar is something that I've just left it as it is. I wouldn't really touch this unless you guys really want to annoy yourself, but this is basically just how quickly the power bar fills up with a pass or a shot. I would just leave this as a standard, just because if you start chopping and changing it, you're going to have to start retraining your muscles in your thumb to work out how long you should be holding the ball for a shot and things like that. First touch control error, I've raised this to 55 just to add that bit of spice. Every so often a ball will be fizzed into you and the first touch that you receive isn't always going to be as good as you expect. Just something to add to the realism of it. Even professional players miscontrol the ball. It is very rare, but it can sometimes happen. Before we get started on the CPU gameplay customization, one thing I will ask you guys to do is make sure that you smash a like on this video and also consider hitting subscribe if you enjoy FIFA content or gaming content as a whole. I appreciate the support that I've received so far on the channel. Honestly, I can't thank you guys enough, and I just hope that you enjoy this video as well, and I do hope that it helps you with your FIFA 22 career mode. So for the sprint speed for CPU, we've got that to 40, so that's matching the user gameplay customization. We don't want to sort of like give any buffs to this CPU here. The main aim for us is to just try and slow the overall game down. The buffs that we're giving to them is in things like the shots and the passes. And, in terms of acceleration, we've left that at 50, the same as what we've done for the user gameplay. Shot error, we've got down to 45, so they actually have 10 points on us in this respect. More shots on target for the opposition means that there's more chance that you are going to concede goals, but hopefully that makes it a lot more difficult for you guys. Pass error, we've lowered down to 47, so they've still got the opportunity for some passes to go awry. That's your main opportunity to intercept the ball, but most of the passes are going to be accurate. Shot speed and pass speed, we've lowered down to 45 just to match our user gameplay customization. Injury frequency matches ours, but in terms of injury severity, we've got that down to 50. It's not really something that's going to affect us too much over the course of our career mode. We don't really get involved in the opposition's getting injured players, so I've just left that at 50. I've increased the goalkeeper ability up to 60. Word of warning, guys, and I apologize in advance, one-on-ones are getting a lot more difficult. With the way that I've set these sliders out, one-on-ones aren't a guarantee anymore, and I must admit it frustrated me a lot in the beginning, but I actually enjoy it a lot. The fact that even when you're one-on-one with a keeper now, I'm still in that position where there's a thought in my mind that I'm like, this could still end up going wide. This isn't a guaranteed goal, which I actually quite enjoy. So for the marking, run frequency, line height, line length and line width, we've left those all at 50. Like I mentioned, for user gameplay customization, that's basically all down to the type of team that you're playing and the formation that they're set up with and the tactics that they use. So we're not making any changes to these. The fullback position, we've lowered that down to 48, so it's less likely for the wingbacks to push forward, meaning that there's going to be more defensive options for the opposition, making it more difficult to break the opposition down, which in turn is going to make it more difficult for you guys to score. First touch control error, we've got down to 48 as well. Less opportunity for them making those mistakes at the back, so it makes it more difficult for you to win the ball. Their passing's incredibly accurate. Their first touches are near enough perfect, so it makes it really difficult to get the ball off them. You have to make sure that you set up really well or you're planning for those interceptions. So just before I go, one other thing that I need to mention to you guys is that these slider settings are probably perfect for a top tier European team, or like between 4 and 5 stars in terms of the quality of the team. These sliders are probably perfect. What I will say is the lower down you go, so for instance 1 star, 2 star teams, the game becomes so much harder, just because as a standard the quality of the players isn't as good. Their first touches are already going to be poor. Their shots are already going to be poor, so it makes the game 10 times more difficult. One thing I will be really interested in is to hear not only how you get on with the sliders, but also the team that you're using and how you found it. I desperately want feedback on if you've been using lower league size and how you find the slider settings, or if you've been using top tier teams and if you think the settings are difficult. I appreciate you guys checking the video out. Make sure you leave something in the comment section below. Let me know your thoughts. I've always had so much traffic on my slider settings videos, and I really think for this community, that's what brings all you guys together. And I'm so grateful for you providing all your feedback, letting other people know just how good the slider settings are, or what I can do to tweak them so that other people can then get the best out of FIFA 22, because that's what we're all here for, just to get the best out of FIFA 22 that we possibly can. I appreciate you guys checking the video out. If there's any other setting videos that you want me to do, or any other advice that you want me to give, make sure that you leave a comment in the comment section below. And as always, I will see you guys next time on Cali Sunset Gaming.